state, and they have a repository where they're collecting all of that asset information for all of the communities. So they want to make sure that they have an accurate depiction of all of the community's assets. The other reason that you would want to do that is if we haven't identified that asset within the vulnerability assessment, it may not be eligible for funding on down the line should you pursue a grant to retrofit that asset.
Okay.
We're missing one.
Okay,
It's gonna be on 54 Country Road South,
okay,
and it's a maintenance building that we own.
all right.
So we'll take a close look at this, and the village manager will
For sure.
add whatever has to be added.
Excellent.
It's about right.
Yeah, I see
Okay,
it, it's not utilities. Okay, got it. They don't have to walk on it.
All right.
Well,
So the other thing that
So this potential funding,
Yeah.
which is really one part.
yeah.
This potential funding is only for funding for, in this case, flood issues that affect village assets. Has nothing to do with a residential
That's a
asset.
great point. That's a great point.
Have I got that right?
You have that right. This program is focused on those local community assets. And they don't have to necessarily be publicly owned. For instance, a hospital or a medical facility that's really important to the community. The community may own the lift stations or the roads or the drainage system surrounding that facility. So you'd want to know that that facility is there because your community relies upon it. But that's accurate that, you know, all roads lead to an accurate prioritized list of those assets for potential funding. But yeah, the state of Florida's program is focused on those publicly held assets. This is not a program about helping individual property owners retrofit or elevate or anything like that.
Thank you. All right. So with that in mind, we have another Menti question for you. And we really want to know what assets in your community are most important to you. And we don't need to use the Menti app. We can just kind of talk through that if you like. So we already heard roads. And, you know, there is this nice town hall, which is one of your assets that the community uses a lot. Are there other assets in the community that you feel are
water plant,
the water plant?
yeah, didn't make the list.
Yeah, I thought it was on there.
4700 Wolford Road.
Oh, okay. So it's not within the geographic location of this community.
So we actually, our city limits go up Gulf Road to Woolbright, down Woolbright Road, down Military Trail to Woolbright. And we have two commercial districts on either side, and the water plant is over next to one of the commercial districts.
Okay. All right.
So our city limits look kind of weird.
All right. Well, that's really good information. So yes, we definitely want to get the water plant on our list.
If the roads are private, which they are roads off the list?
No, they are not.
Oh, good.
Roads are not off the list.
And I will tell you, as somebody who writes a lot of these grant applications for local communities throughout the state, road elevation is a wildly popular grant application for people to do enhanced stormwater or stormwater treatment areas or swales or even pumping and elevate the road simultaneously. So adapting roads is an important project that the state has funded in the past.
Even if they're private.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they're within your community, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So they're community.
If they're flooded, then you can't get around.
Anything else that I noticed you all have a lot of parks and natural areas here. So those stood out to me. So if anything else as we go through today's presentation, or if it comes up in the future, we'll be happy to include it. All right. Responses coming in. Thank you so much. So where are we at today? We started some data collection, as you can see by our list. The next step is that we're going to take these assets and we're going to do an evaluation of the flooding and flooding exposure to those assets. So what assets are at risk to flooding, and to what degree are those assets at risk? So that includes the sensitivity analysis. We'll evaluate to what depth and how and the duration of these assets being flooded. We may identify flooding focus areas where it's worse rather than better. And then the vulnerability assessment report with maps and tables and lists of your assets will be all included in that report. I'd mentioned we do have a steering committee. So we have some representatives from the town on our steering committee that are going to be helping us through this process, making sure that we're on track. We're looking at our modeling analysis and methodologies and making sure the results match what is observed here locally in the community. Maybe assisting us with identifying other data sets that we can incorporate into the report that are critical to the community. Again, identifying the community assets, and then reviewing the project findings and providing us any additional recommendations for that report. We will be doing some more public outreach, so we'll be back once we have a draft vulnerability assessment. We'll be back here speaking to you about the results of what we found, and then get some additional feedback and input from you on that draft report. So I have one more question for you. What services and facilities are most critical to you during or after a climate event? So if we have a big tropical storm, what are the things that you want to see back online first? Where are you reaching out to for assistance? What do you think, helps you most after an event? And you don't have to use the app if you don't want. You can speak to me. It's fine too. We'll take your comments as however you like.
Debris removal.
Oh, debris removal. That's a good one. Sure.
Wi-Fi up and running, but you probably can't help with that.
Yeah, Wi-Fi and communication is always a little bit troublesome after a storm. I was here for Wilma, and about one day after the power went out, all the batteries and the cell towers went out too. So we had nothing. So what else? Anything else?
How do you work with the water, the canals that are around here?
So the Lake Worth Drainage District manages the canals around this community. We, and of course they work with the larger South Florida Water Management District, the primary. So we can communicate with them as much as we need to. We'll likely reach out and pull any additional data that they have about the canals here, making sure they're maintaining those canals. There may be an opportunity to make improvements to those canals if necessary. So we're certainly, willing to have those conversations.
Yeah, for instance, if you notice an intersection that feeds into a canal that particularly backs up a lot, maybe it's debris related, after a storm event, or it's just a routine, thunderstorm where it's low and maybe there's something occurring downstream where they haven't maintained appropriately, or the size of the structure just isn't enough to handle the capacity of the rainfall discharge into that particular area. Those are conversations that we can have with them and try to work collaboratively to see what the downstream constraint is.
They've recently cleaned out the canals that border us, so I think we're in pretty good shape for now.
That's great.
And while sea level rise doesn't directly affect this community because you are further inland, it does affect the system as it drains downstream. So it's just something to be aware of, that there are constraints within the system that are occurring, and they're starting to occur, more readily as we're seeing that increased tidal flooding. So there are things that can be fixed and things that are changing over time. But having those conversations with particularly the South Florida Water Management District, because they're receiving federal and state funding to work on their structures as well, because it is a regionally connected system. So that's important to remember as well.
All right. So again, just wrapping up today, we're going to be continuing to do some data collection. We'll identify if there's anything missing. Hopefully we can then target collecting that data. We'll do the GIS modeling. So it's just basically we look at land elevation and the rainfall events and how the rain falls on the land. And then we'll identify if there's any hotspots or focus areas within the community that we need to look into more depth. And then we'll come back to you with our results of our analysis. Meanwhile, engaging with the steering committee throughout the process. So we do have monthly progress meetings, and you all can get up to date on how we're progressing with the study. We are targeting finishing this. This is required to be done by June of 2026. We're hoping that we can expedite that a little bit. So we're looking at wrapping it up before then.
Can you explain how we came to be part of this?
Oh, I think that's a Palm Beach County question. Megan?
The question was, how did we become a part of this?
Yes,
All right.
we're one of 6 communities.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, Palm Beach County's Office of Resilience started coordinating with all the cities in Palm Beach County, the 39, saying, hey, the governor has an executive order requiring all counties and cities to have this vulnerability assessment done by 2026. About half of the communities at that point had applied for funding or pursued one on their own. We got town managers and staff in a room and said, free money, free grant, but nothing's free. It requires time and effort. Here's the program. Is anyone interested in the county applying on behalf of the municipalities? We recognize some jurisdictions are smaller than others. And 7 said, yes, we'd love to. And then one of those ended up applying on their own and pursuing the grant, which is great. And they said, thank you, we're going to take it on our own. So we were left with 6 municipalities where they wanted to work together with the county. And then we added that scope of work onto our existing contract with Tetra Tech to maintain that efficiency. So I think we're 37. We're at 37 municipalities doing it now. If you have friends at Westlake or Royal Palm, you can ask them about what they're up to. So we're in really good shape, and we're happy to be helpful where we can be, but let the towns and the villages really provide that local knowledge, that local expertise. To be honest, this is the first time I've been inside your gate, so we want to hear from you and be helpful where it makes sense.
And who are the other 5?
Haverhill, Hypoluxo, Palm Springs,
Yeah.
Cloud Lake,
And
Glenridge?
Glenridge.
and Glen Ridge. Yep. And it just worked out that they're all kind of in the same area. Yep.
Thanks. Appreciate that. All right. We do have 2 ongoing county-wide surveys that we've worked with Palm Beach County to develop. One is a climate change survey, and then Palm Beach County has a flooding survey. So if you ever see flooding, you can go and report that flooding to the county so we can continue to track and improve the data that we have. So I'll leave these up on the screen for anybody who's interested in supplying some answers to our countywide surveys. But other than that, we can take questions, get some more snacks, cup of coffee, whatever you need. So I will take any additional questions at this time, or anyone from our team.
I'm still a little confused about the funding.
Okay.
Today, before all this comes to pass, if we get a big tropical storm or hurricane or a lot of water, we have debris. Christine will start the process of working the FEMA system to get reimbursed for the cost of cleaning it up. That's good. What does this do in addition to that which already exists?
So this is state funding. So from the state legislature, they're currently doing their budget, and they have a pot of money that they have set aside for not only these planning grants, which are 100% funded, but also infrastructure grants that are a 50% match. Those infrastructure grants are awarded to municipalities and local governments that apply for the grants. The grant application period is opening up here in June.
July
July
1 to
1.
September 1.
So, so from July 1 to September 1, the municipalities will take projects that have, or issues that have been identified through the vulnerability assessment, identify what the solution is, and say, hey, state of Florida, we have this problem, here's our solution, and we'd like to get a 50% match from you to implement this project. And so all the communities put in their applications, and they get ranked and listed in order by this Department of Environmental Protection. And depending on the amount of funding that the legislature provides for that plan, they will select, however far they can get down that list.
So this is not federal money.
No,
This is state money.
yes.
And what would be a good example of something that would go to the top of that list?
We've seen, as Aaron mentioned, a lot of road projects.
Road elevation and drainage projects are really popular for coastal communities, shoreline projects. Palm Beach County got money to redo a bridge. But road elevation and drainage projects typically have been pretty high on that list.
Yeah.
We've seen, and there is a trend now that the state would like to see projects that incorporate what they call nature-based features, rather than handle a stormwater problem with a pump. They'd like to see swales in natural areas, or floodable parks, floodable components of parks that can attenuate some of that stormwater. So all different types of projects, water, wastewater projects, lift station retrofits have been popular as well.
So if I can add one comment too, right? When you mentioned FEMA money, this is different. It doesn't have to have a declared disaster
Right.
to go after this funding. If you've driven on Australian Avenue downtown West Palm, it can get flooded just on a rainy day or a rainy event. And so you don't have to have a hurricane, a named event happen to say we need 9 million, 20 million, whatever amount of money to repair this issue that is currently a problem, or what our assessment shows is going to be a likely problem. So you can be proactive, you can get out in front of things without having a big event occur.
So these are like mitigation projects.
Yeah, and to build on what Megan was saying and what you just suggested also, this can help you with the next local mitigation strategy update. Local mitigation strategy is something that every county within Florida has to develop, and it's essentially their prioritized list of projects if there are declared disasters. So it helps you think through proactively what some of those project priorities could be on down the line.
But the mitigation efforts for which the funding might be available has to be tied to some notion of this environmental problem. It's not just our lift station's old and has to be redone.
That's a great question and a great point. But yeah, if it's a lift station in an area that is known to flood or
It
has.
needs to be in an area that's, there has to be a tie. to
Yeah, it can't
flooding.
be deferred maintenance, but it's all how you write up your grant application.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you to
Alright.
Palm Beach County for helping us with this, because we're out of our depth here with all the complicated stuff.
Good questions, though. Really good questions today. We certainly appreciate all you
Well, I'm
participate.
trying to get you to pay for redoing all our lift stations.
Lift stations make it into the application list, right?
Yeah.
Our water utility does score pretty well on the ranked list.
But you need, again, you need to be able to demonstrate that the problem with the lift station that you want to fix,
Right.
it derived from some notion of it's in a
Right.
vulnerable area.
So if it makes this report, then it qualifies.
That's exactly right. So
So-
in the grant application, they will ask you in your project application, have you conducted a vulnerability assessment? Has this project been identified in the vulnerability assessment?
And you're gonna
You
tell
always
us,
answer yes.
and you're gonna tell us how vulnerable we are.
That's correct.
Okay, so the good news is we can demonstrate we have a study.
Yes.
The bad news is because we're sort of on the high ground here, maybe we're not vulnerable in the assessment's view.
Not necessarily. I mean, because we have to evaluate a 100-year and a 500-year
Make
rainfall
us vulnerable.
event.
And it's not, you know, it's not just elevation above sea level rise, it's the low lying areas within where all that water dumps down, right?
Right.
And puddles.
So the fact that we're in X floodplain doesn't mean anything with this process.
No,
Okay. And does this have to go through LMS?
no.
Good.
Just out of curiosity, how big is that fund? We're talking about 10 and $20 million.
For the planning grants, they appropriate about $20 million a year. That's what they've done consistently for the last several years. But for the capital project grants, the statute says no less than $100 million a year. Traditionally, the last couple of years, they've been appropriating about 200 million a year. But you know, nothing is safe while the legislature is in session, so we don't know if we're gonna continue to get those levels of funding, but you know, we hope. But of course, you're applying against 67 counties and over 400 municipalities. So you absolutely want to make sure that you've done your vulnerability assessment and that you've got that data to support your application.
So the people who are applying now, they've done a vulnerability assessment.
Yes.
Or they're in flight on one.
Okay. How long has this money been available?
Since 2021, the statute was enacted that provided those minimal funding amounts. But prior to that, they were awarding also planning grants and they were awarding implementation grants, but it was really haphazard. There weren't standards for it. There weren't consistent funding amounts. So in 2021, when that legislation was enacted, it was a really catalyzing event to help communities be able to plan a little bit more predictably for a grant funding cycle and how that process would work and how the grants are evaluated. So it institutionalized the program. So we're 4 years in.
Is there a sunset?
No.
One thing too, it reminded me, something that's important for Palm Beach County when we're making our own appropriations requests too, is those folks saying, well, did you apply for Resilient Florida funding? Because we want to see you try to exhaust those possibilities there first. So if we can say, yes, we did, and we just missed the mark, or we didn't make the cut, right? Like that's helpful in that appropriations request as justification, you know, further. So sometimes even at least applying, right, how is something our legislative folks are looking to.
All right, any other questions?
Great.
Hearing none? Folks, everybody's good? All right.
Thank you.
And yeah, if you have any other questions in the future, I think Christine is your point of contact to reach us. And happy to take anything that comes up afterwards too. So
Thank you very much.
thank
Yeah.
you very much.